You know, Mama's attitude to life is really more, what can I do for the weak? What can I do for those that are not in the radar screen? What can I do more? What is my role in helping those that have been either forgotten or left out by some design, whether by human exclusion or otherwise? That's what I saw from her, because even the work with orphans, there was no program in the country. She had to bring in her own effort and mobilize women, mobilize donors, mobilize partners, and we handled that matter.
So I would like also to say to the women in particular, that since I understand that they do so much in Karamoja, they are therefore a powerful group, it is important that the women fight for peace first, and everything else will be provided as a result of that.
Mama's name is NAKIRU. NAKIRU, remember, Mama came in Karamoja when Karamoja was on its knees. In all terms, socially, economically, security-wise, future, Karamoja was completely at the rock bottom. Mama came when there was a lot of famine and height of poverty. At that time, we were talking about 85% people living below poverty line. Literacy rate was 11%. There was a lot of total destitution of our people. That was the time when the insecurity was at its height. And you could not believe, actually, I remember at that time, you know, I said to myself, I don't think I will live to see a peaceful Karamoja. We just saw, and we were so desperate as young Karamojong. Now, Mama comes, there was famine, there was no food, the place was dry, and people were actually living a life of, we don't know whether tomorrow we will be alive. Now, at that time, when Mama was appointed, she comes to Karamoja, and the week she's in Karamoja, God opened rain. We didn't know where the rain came from, and rain after day after rain, and then people said, who has brought this rain? Because this is not what we are used to. And the only difference was that Mama had stepped in Karamoja as our minister. People all agreed her name will be NAKIRU. NAKIRU is the giver of rain. Rain is the source of life. And for us who live very far from Lake Victoria, a liter of water is a very serious issue. We appreciate it so much. So when God gives you barrels of water through rain, she was baptized our rain giver, Our Lady of Rain, NAKIRU.
How would you describe your experience in Nairobi in summary?
Nairobi, my experience was really insecure and always worried about the safety of my family. And so I always had to be very, very careful where the children went, how they went there and how they came home, and because we were close to Uganda, we always could hear some rumors of what's happening in Uganda, and sometimes what we heard made us even more insecure, or sometimes made us feel like, okay, this struggle is now balanced, so on both sides. But generally speaking, honestly, I can say that being in Nairobi was not easy at that time, until such a time when the government in Uganda, working with the Kenyan government, started harassing people and actually arresting them and handing them over to Uganda. And so that made it absolutely clear that living in Nairobi was not the safest place to be. And maybe there must be a way we get out of Kenya. And so that's when we started listening to more people who were advising us on what to do, and wondering where now in the world we could go.
President Obote had agreed with President Moi to exchange political, I don't know, can't say asylum seekers, but people who are disturbing government. Yes. So they were starting now to hunt us down. So yes, she was. So they first took Chiria and exchanged him with I don't know who. The night they took Chiria, I think that the next day. But we had heard, Miriam Black had warned Maama, had come to Maama and warned her, and we were trying to look for ways of leaving Kenya. I remember she went and picked you from school. You were in Nyeri as well, in a boarding school. And we started preparing. We didn't know where the countries were not opening up for us. I didn't have papers, so I was not exactly under UNDP, UNHCR rather. And so I was staying, definitely I was staying, because I didn't have papers. Maama was insisting. We were on a phone with Uncle John in London. Maama wanted to go to London because that is a place she understood. She knew that she would get along with help and so on. But London was taking long to open for us.
Yeah, fortunately, people were very kind, really, in the world at that time, I must say, because I met people who worked within the UN refugee offices in Kenya, and one of the legal officers there was a woman called Miriam Black, who I got to know as we continued to discuss issues of my family. And she was the one who first told me that it was important that we leave Nairobi. So I said, we leave Nairobi, and where do we go? She said, well, we can begin to look around and discuss with embassies and see where you could go. But personally, I really didn't know where else in the world we could go except perhaps the UK, because I had family members living in the UK. I thought that perhaps UK could be another place we could consider to go and live as refugees. But when I contacted the members of my family who lived there, they told me that no, the UK government knew my husband and they knew his activities in Uganda, and they would not be willing at this time to stand between the government in Uganda and my husband's group, which they called a rebel group.
It was tough, very tough. So at the end, Red Cross gave me papers. At the end, at the same time, Sweden opened. And then it was like, Mama was like, Sweden, I know nobody in Sweden. How can I go to Sweden?
I said, Sweden? Where in the world is Sweden?
But thank God, eventually she was like, this was God's plan. So we live in Nairobi.
The Swedish experience was a much, much relaxed one. It was amazing, really, to me and even to the children, young as they were, to realize that life could be so relaxed and so safe, and that they could play around and nobody would be following them and nobody would be saying, you're not allowed to go there and you're not allowed to go here. So we went to Sweden and we found a camp, a refugee camp, where they had prepared for us to go. And we went to this camp, which was not a very big camp, where there were refugees from many countries of the world. But we had a cottage there that became our home. And life changed completely. We started living like normal people. Our children started going to school within the camp. And the little ones, Patience and Diana, went to a kindergarten, also within the camp. And so we really felt at home, and people were very kind and very welcoming. And so our experience in Sweden taught us a lot about life.
I saw directly when she came in my room that it was a special lady. It was not an ordinary people, because she moves and she is a little bit special. I worked also with other Ugandan refugees, but I saw directly it was something special with that woman. And after 2 or 3 visits with me, I asked her directly, who are you? Because I can see that it's something special with you. And then she explained for me that I have a background that the other hasn't. So she explained that she has been married with a man who was a minister in an old regime in Uganda, and now they were refugees. So yes.
At what point did you see a possibility of returning home?
Some 2 years after that, we had moved from that camp, had been taken to a place called Gothenburg, and we had really got used to living in Sweden and managing our lives. But one day we were surprised to open the door, and here was my husband coming to check on us, so to speak, as if he's coming from the neighborhood.
The bell rang and you went to the door. And you came back and told me that there's somebody on the door who says that he's daddy. I came. Yes, I came, and he was actually him, but looking horrible. I said, this is a version of him, but I don't remember him looking like this. Then I think you ran to Mommy, and when she came, that's when we all confirmed, because she screamed, "You're ready."
Now, she called me and she said, you can't imagine what happened yesterday evening. Someone knocked on our door. Diana opened the door and came and said, it is a man outside. And Janet went there. And there was Yuri.
Yes.
She didn't understand anything away from me. And she told me afterwards, you, Cassie, it was not my husband. It was a bushman.
But it was a moving experience, and it woke us up to the fact that there is a chance we could go back home one day.
The First Lady, Mama Janet, when she was coming from Sweden, I was still in Nairobi. She checked in at Intercontinental Hotel and she called me and I went and saw her. So we talked about, you know, the status of the people in Uganda and the many orphans and all that sort of thing. So we kind of discussed, yes, I think it would be important to help those children. And I am happy to say that as soon as she got here, she started the Uganda women's effort to save the children, UWESO.
Can you tell us about UWESO and how it came to be, and at what point was it birthed? At what point?
After I had brought back my family and the children were home, so it was after a few months, but in 1986. So I visited Ruero, and of course there were places where people used to take visitors to see what had happened in Ruero, where there were so many skeletons collected together in different places to show how many people had died. And after I'd gone round many such places, I was taken to what they called a reception center, a government reception center, which was like an orphanage, where they collected children who had no parents or who they met lost on the road, or just young little children. And I got to that place late in the evening, and it was getting dark, so as I drove into that place with the headlights of the car, the children got out of where they were and came out running to see the car. And they came clapping their hands, seeing somebody coming to see them, a place where perhaps nobody would visit. So I saw this, they were about 50 little children. Some of them half dressed, some of them completely naked, some of them. And they came out and they had one man, an adult, who was looking after them. And so I stood there and I said, where are these children from? And he said, they are from all over the country. There are those who have lost their parents, others have separated from their families without knowing where they are going, so we collect them here and we're trying to take care of them, and we are not doing such a good job because we are not able to take care of them yet, but here we try to feed them. And so I stood there and saw those children. And I had some people with me. I took pictures of those children. I took these pictures with me. And when I got home, I was looking at these pictures, and as I was praying, I just felt in my heart that this is something I have to do. In gratitude to God that these children are alive, they didn't die. But also to thank God that He also took us as a family separated, and He took care of us wherever we went, and He brought us home safely. None of us died, and we couldn't take that for granted because many people died. As I said, I had seen so many skeletons of people who died during that war. Any of us could have been those skeletons. But by God's grace, He had taken us through that time, through very, very difficult circumstances, but He brought us home. So I thought, this is what I will do as a gift to God, my Father. That's when we started UWESO.
Mama has been an amazing person. He's an amazing person. To me, all these years, it's been over 20 years, and I've seen her as a destiny enabler. And I saw her, because of her position, because of where she is, her values matter. Her values matter a lot as a first woman in the country. And so her values and her passions were really in sync with mine. And I'd always looked at her, I'd always admired her. The first thing she did that I knew of was UWESO. And then the second one was about the Uganda Youth Forum. I had young kids then, and I used to take them. And sometimes I would be one of the speakers. I would be one of the people who would be there as mothers, as parents, to make sure everything is happening together. So I always admired her in that area of her passion, of her values, and then the steadfastness, because you could hear stories of things happening, and then you would see her composed. No drama, no confusion. So I admired her from a distance.
What propelled you into politics?
Yeah, that one was a calling from God. As I've said, I knew God by that time and walked with Him very, very closely. And many friends and people who I knew and worked with knew that really I was not a person who would go into politics. And I used to say it very often, that even if I was paid, I would not go into politics. But one day, I was actually not even in Uganda. I was visiting another country, somewhere else in Europe. And I had a voice telling me to stand as a member of parliament in my father's area, where we still had a home, where we didn't go that often. But I heard something about standing as a member of parliament. I thought, that's not God. That can't be God. It's not about me. I prayed now. I said, okay, Lord, if you really are, it's you. If you really are the one talking to me, I don't want to stand with anybody and start fighting over politics, because I don't want to stand. But if you let me know that there is nobody to stand in that area, then I will know that you want me to be the one to stand there. So after I'd come home, I started hearing my husband talking to some people on phone, trying to persuade them to stand in that area. And I'd listen, and I'd hear people turning him down and saying, no, sorry, really, we can't stand, we have this or the other. So I one day said to him, I said, you know what? I think God wants me to stand there. And he laughed. And he said, you? He said, you're not a politician. You don't know these things. So how can God talk to you about this? I said, I don't know, but I believe God wants me to stand in Maama. And so eventually he said, okay, you now have to go to SEC. SEC is a top organization of a movement, and talk to them about what you are saying, and if they allow you, we will see. And so they talked amongst themselves back and forth until they all decided, we don't think that this is a good idea. But there were some women who said, but why not? She's also a Ugandan and she wants to stand. Why can't she be allowed to stand? So they said, fine, now my husband said, we nominate a committee. That committee must go and discuss this idea. And if they decide that it's okay for her to stand, we will let her stand. If not, we will see what happens.
Mrs. Museveni has done a lot for Uganda, in that she has made a lot of friends for Uganda. She got a lot of aid herself into the country. Then of course she went into politics and became Minister for Karamoja, and I became Program Officer Karamoja, working with NUSAF. I was being paid by NUSAF. So we went to Karamoja, we worked with women, we did some dams, we got women groups together. They started crops, beautiful crops, harvests and all that sort of thing.
Karamojong people in Uganda were a weakest link, if you can call it that, to independence, to they were the ones that had most problems in the country, and I believed that they were a tribe that is very close to my own people, who are cattle keepers, who believed in cattle keeping as a lifestyle, but they had the largest challenges in the country. They could not feed themselves, so they had famine literally every year. They were a people really who needed leadership that understands where they're coming from, why they have suffered so much. And people were not willing to serve in Karamoja.
But I think when Mama comes to Karamoja, I can tell you that's when we started to see Karamoja resuscitated, Karamoja reignited, Karamoja reintegration. Real one is when Mama came. I think whether we like it or not, and I remember it was, I think, 2002 or 3, I remember meeting the president and I said, Mr. President, Karamoja is a revolution which has not yet taken place. We have done the rest everywhere and we see changes, but for Karamoja, not yet. I think we began when Mama came to Karamoja.
It was so hot that season. There had not been rain for a long time. And the place was like a desert. And yet they had cattle with no water, with no pastures. And so they would run around with their cattle the whole day. Eventually, I invited a group of church leaders from Kampala, and they came and we prayed with them. They prayed with us. And then I invited the group that called themselves the elders of Karamoja. They came and we prayed with those church leaders. And I remember Bishop Rede was one of those church leaders. After he had prayed, he said, "Can I ask you if any of you would like to give your life to God? Would you raise up your hands?" And all of them raised up their hands. So he led them in the prayer to give their lives to God. And they gave their lives to God in that meeting. And after we had prayed and finished our meeting, the rain came down. Like we saw the clouds gathering in no time at all. The rain came down. And Karamoja was cold and it was wet, and from that time it started raining and the land changed and the pastures grew and cattle had water. So we continued in prayer the whole time we were in Karamoja.
We were praying in Morulinga and God would just give us rain. Sometimes we would be praying and the amount of rain that would pour, you would never believe it. It would just overwhelm all of us. So bumper harvest after bumper harvest. People were filling their granaries with food. And to the extent that in 2013, we sat with all the development partners that were supporting Karamoja and we said, now we are moving from emergency to development. So we developed what we call the Karamoja Development Action Plan. It is that plan now where we moved from the food to now develop water for production. We said we have now satisfied our stomachs. So let us go for some bigger dream. So now we sat with the president and the Ministry of Water and the Ministry of Agriculture, and we started to develop the two-pronged strategy of big dams and small valley tanks. We said the Ministry of Water, you build big dams of over 6 billion liters of water. Ministry of Agriculture, you and Karamoja, you can build valley tanks of about 10 to 20,000 cubic liters of water. Those you can actually dig easily, and we built in the big reservoirs in Karamoja. Next to Murulinga, not far from Murulinga, you have got one a nice one called a rechek. Then you have got, you know, in Kotido, you have got in Kabong, you have got in South Karamoja, we've got in Abim, big reservoirs, and mamas saw the harvesting of water, because now God was giving us a lot of water. And we had time now to see this water gathered for dry season to give it to the cows, because we knew there was going to be dry season. The valley tanks were for wet season, because they would dry during the dry season. Why? Because the cows now would come near a home and they needed water. So then you would use the valley tanks for water. So we foresaw that, and Mama helped us to answer the question of water in Karamoja.
At that time, they had 7 sub-counties. I went around the 7 sub-counties trying to find out what are the government programs in Karamoja, how are they doing, why aren't they working, and so on and so forth. And I found very little that really showed that government was serving in Karamoja. Because of the cattle rustling that kept the area unsafe and insecure, people wouldn't go to Karamoja, government monitors wouldn't monitor the programs in Karamoja. So even the government funding that went annually as part of government budget to Karamoja would just be utilized badly by the leaders themselves on a personal level, but the government programs would not happen.
Then the second thing we did, and Mama said, after now we have gotten the water moving, can we now tackle education? Because you see, the young people now are growing and they need now to expand education. And we put in the schools, boarding schools in Karamoja. I think Mama built 21 boarding schools, dormitories, classrooms, and laboratories, teachers' houses. Fantastic facilities, and children started going to school. And at that time, she agreed with the Mzee, said, look, let us give Karamojong young, elite scholarships. So because higher education is now very expensive, they have missed all the time when it was free. Now, there's money required even to go to Makerere, to go to all this. Although they are universities, they are still out of reach. So we had 100 Karamojong going on the scholarship per year. And by the time Mama left, we had over 800 graduates. When she took over, we were just a handful. We were 3-4 doctors only. Now we have 45 doctors. Most of this came from the graduate scholarship scheme, which Mama and Mzee, set up for Karamoja.
I was there knowing very well that the challenges in Karamoja would only change by God's intervention himself, not me, not because I wanted to serve, not because I understood them, but I believed that if God takes me to Karamoja by his own intervention, he would be the one to really change Karamoja.
Then she said, okay, now what we do, the next thing, let us search our minds. How can we change the way people live so that they can start to produce more and also enjoy housing with a small mabati on top and maybe a bed to sleep on? From a hut to that is a big jump, a big leap. So we started at that time what we call the modern villages. And that was the time when we had this hydroform coming into Uganda. And Mama helped us with the hydroform machines. And we started building houses for grandmothers, for men and women in their own villages, changing the environment where they were living. I can tell you, when you go now, the number, people picked this up now as on themselves and started building mabati houses. even if they were semi-permanent. And Maama said, no, let us reward those who have given their guns with mabati. So now people have mabati houses in Karamoja. You can't believe the change which has happened.
There are many things in Uganda that are different because there are many people who pray and who know God and who have a relationship with God personally. And their prayers have done so much for Uganda, even though there are many things which are still not right. But we cannot ignore the fact that there are many who know God and who pray for Uganda. And for me, it is even more important to know that younger people, many younger people and many young families know God and walk with God. And it's a gift to us as elders in this society. And to just know that there is a small percentage of our own work that has connected many people to God. There is no way we can ever thank Him enough, but we pray that He continues to walk and work through the many people who are available to Him now to get more Ugandans to know God, and that will change this country forever.
Unfortunately, Maama had to leave. Now, when Maama had to leave, of course, all of us went into a spirit, a day and a time of crying. We were all weeping and crying, and it was not possible for us to believe that our key had gone, and we were now left all alone to the mercies of the state again. Because for us, Maama was in between us and the state. The state is so impersonal. The state doesn't know. The state doesn't have a heart. Maama brought the heart to the state and to governance of Karamoja. Maama brought the ear to listen to us. So what happened? Karamoja had become peaceful. The people, we went, I think I went with Maama to Kenya. We were there in the Turkana. The Turkana had invited Maama for their day of cultural day. And they said, we want to look like Karamojong. We want you help us to make us like Karamojong. Karamojong were becoming now the example of all the entire region, the Horn of Africa. The Ethiopians also wanted the southern Ethiopia because we came from there. They still speak our language. They said, we want to be like Karamojong. Maama has changed the Karamojong. Can you tell us how? So we were now basking in the glory of progress.